Hi, this is Barry Phelps, the old gray-haired HR guy, back to visit with you again. This is my second episode. There's been a little delay in getting it put together with a few other things happening, but I'm ready to go. I had a number of good views and some nice feedback from my first episode back a few weeks now. Encouraged me enough to keep moving and giving it a try. And regarding my own assessment, I realized that I needed to make much more eye contact, more effective eye contact with my audience. So we'll try to make some adjustments to do a better job of that as I continue to improve wherever I can. With that first episode, I worked from a script because I wanted to be sure to say everything just the right way to establish a proper foundation. Going forward, I'm going to endeavor to make these presentations more free flowing, um, just going from some notes with a few bullet points. I mentioned last time that this episode was going to cover the topic of mentoring. However, I changed my mind based on some things that have developed in the last few weeks. Um, so I'm going to put that off to another episode a little bit further down the road. Instead, I want to get into a different subject and want to cover something from a much more strategic perspective. So here are a few semi-organized thoughts, and let me pull up some slides to entertain you. Excuse me. Hopefully that comes through okay. I settled on the major topic of what HR management could, would, and should be in a well-run organization. It's a focus on talking about what HR management is and what it is not. This change was also somewhat sparked by my learning that a former mentee and current colleague was recently taking on a new position in HR management. And I thought that it would be a good time to share my thoughts. I hope that I can get her on a future podcast as a guest now that her career has really taken off. So, and by the way, happy birthday, Jen. Specifically, I want to offer my opinion regarding what human resource management could, would, and should be in a well-run, successful organization. This is based on my 55 plus years in HR management and the in-depth experience that I've gained, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I said before. But let me stop there for a moment. Apparently, some people in various forums seem to be bothered or troubled by my mentioning my years of experience. Um, I don't know if they think that I'm bragging. Maybe I'm an egomaniac. Um, are they intimidated? I do this really just to simply make an effort to establish credibility in terms of I know whereof I speak, that I've got the mental scars to prove it. I run around the track a number of times. I certainly don't know everything about human resource management, but I definitely have seen a lot. This includes working for 9 different organizations as an employee and consulting and teaching with even more. By the way, only 2 of those 9 organizations are still operating under the same name as when I worked for them. One is United States Air Force, which I think they're still flying those airplanes. And the other is North American Van Lines, which has been greatly downsized since I was there in the late 80s. And that kind of tells a story too, relative to how things have changed in the business world, and more dramatically all the time, perhaps. And that certainly was not my original career plan, to work for that many organizations. I like to tell the story of my father in terms of his career progression to kind of put it in perspective. He was a veteran of World War II, that greatest generation, and he went to work virtually his entire career for Culligan, the water softener company. Spent 30 years there, retired at 65 with pension and profit sharing, and that to me was the model of that greatest generation. Myself as a baby boomer, I thought, well, then that's what I should focus on after I decided that I wouldn't make the Air Force my career, which I did seriously consider. So I decided then, when I found that first civilian professional position, that I would stay with that company for my career. But in fact, I could actually potentially do my father one better, in that that company, Lindbergh Heat Treating, gave the gold watch at 30 years of service, not at retirement. You could retire early at age 55 if you had at least 10 years of service. And my thought was that, well, then I would do that, and I would start a second career with my own HR management consulting company, do some teaching at the college and university level, and again, take a little bit different path. Now, as it turned out, all of those pieces ultimately came together, not necessarily the way I planned or in the time frame that I had planned, but it did all, in fact, fall in place. So to me, ideally, the HR management professional is a full business strategic partner. And that person has a seat at the table, figuratively and literally. And I'll talk about that as we proceed. And I say ideally because this is not always the way it is from my experience. I don't have any research or surveys to support this, but suggested maybe no more than maybe 75% of the organizations really put HR management into that kind of role, and at that level. The senior HR management person, regardless of their job, should be on the same organizational level as the other functional department heads, the C-level positions, if you will, and reporting directly to the president or CEO or owner, whomever the senior official is. In fact, the job title should be VP of HR or CHRO, to establish it at that same level. Calling the position a director or senior director really diminishes the role as compared to the other VPs. Now, there's been significant progress in the last couple of decades, I believe, concerning HR management's place in the organization. And I've also been teaching this for over 35 years now at the college and university level for both undergraduate and graduate programs. And there I go again, bragging. Let me talk about that just a little bit in terms of another slide. Bear with me on these. You can see the professionalism placed on this. I thought this would be kind of a little walk back. I'll fumble through these a little bit because I'm working from the originals that I'll explain here in a moment. That this goes all the way back to the teaching when we, state of the art, was using transparencies with an overhead projector and projecting those onto a screen, or perhaps a whiteboard. Pull down screen was typically what we would have in the classrooms. And I designed a few slides of my own like this with my printing that was fairly legible. And my whole point here, talking about HR's place in the organization using a little crossword kind of puzzle, was again that full business strategic partner. It's interwoven. It's integrated in terms of the business, an integral part of it. The key in terms of looking at that is to avoid HR being relegated to that necessary evil there in the bottom corner, and that it's just an administrative function, not that full business strategic partner. So again, back to what HRM could, would, and should be, and really be expected to be. Here's a professionally prepared slide, overhead transparency from those days, looking at how we manage our human resources. And again, bear with me, it's not rolling along with the arrows. These were not professionally done in this slideshow. I used to have people do that for me. I don't have any people anymore. Anyway, success factors, organizationally speaking, are some pretty common themes in most organizations. And looking at communication being an essential component and HR planning being an integral part of this strategic linkage, that we're looking at things from the big picture, not just the transactional standpoint. So again, just for laughs, I thought, and I put out a few of these into the slideshow. These are rather primitive homemade slides. Back in ancient times, HR was really considered just that administrative function, just very transactional. That was all that was expected, and that's a key. We laid out with, again, a professionally prepared transparency, the common HRM success factors all come into play almost anywhere you might think, any type of organization, any business or industry, that management's attitude is critical. The skill sets of your management people also very critical in this era of what I call the management crisis that we experience in so many places. Strategic fit is key, that we're looking at things from that big picture to drive the business forward to accomplish the goals and objectives that will help us maintain our competitive posture or gain market share, whatever our goals may be. Everything we do is building a reinforcing framework or structure for the business. And then communication, again, we can never overemphasize in an organization, and HR should be right in the middle of that. Communicate, 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 up, down, sideways. It's just essential. So we're proactively nurturing and adapting to new realities. Now, this goes back many, many years. You can see how I think all of this applies in the current era. So these go back, as I say, to kind of the history here with the evolution of HR, my own creation, once again, or my suggestion, question mark, whether we are a full business strategic partner. But I also look at the history, how it has evolved. If we go to the bottom, really before the 50s, the 1950s, there really was no specific function established. In the 50s, personnel is what it became known as. In the 60s, industrial relations was the next description for that functional area. And that stayed with us for quite some time. In fact, the master's degree that I completed back in the mid 80s actually was a Master of Science in Industrial Relations from Loyola University of Chicago. That's what it was called back then. It was for many years, now has evolved beyond that. But that was the title at the time. In the 80s, employee relations began to catch on. That was really more of just one of the sub-functions of HR. as it has since become known. In between there, we briefly toyed with the idea of calling ourselves ombudsman, but that really didn't catch on. But ultimately, by the 80s, late into the 90s, human resources was adopted as the name for the function, and it continued to evolve. And again, hopefully having increasing impact on organizations. I suggested this last one just as a tongue-in-cheek projection of the future. Perhaps we would call it the people process strategist facilitator in the future. But whatever it is, and HR has hung on now for a while, it should be that full business strategic partner. Otherwise, I think we risk extinction as a function in organizations. So I've got some recurring themes here for you to consider as I kind of walk through this. Suggestion again with one of the old transparencies that HR delivers organizational excellence in 4 ways, that we're partners, strategic partners, again, emphasizing that. We have expertise in work systems that we can add value to the organization with our expertise. We are employee champions, and I'll talk about that a little bit further into the episode about the importance of that advocacy. And then a transforming agent, which really I think any person in management needs to consider adopting the role of being a change agent. That the business world is changing, everything is changing. If you're not changing, you're standing still, which really means that you're falling behind. So very much important importance in terms of all management positions, and certainly HR management, no exception. It was a very popular management book back in those days. It's 1982 and following. Some of you may be familiar with it. It was written by Thomas J. Peters and Robert H. Waterman Jr. It was called In Search of Excellence. Here's just a snapshot of the cover. It was so popular then that companies would often buy the book in bulk and give copies to all of their management team members. Maybe have seminars internally to dig into the concepts and principles presented in the book. Very popular from that standpoint. So management people, again, including HR management people, were really talking those kinds of terms back then in those ancient times. And I think if you looked at the book today, you still might find some golden nuggets in there. I'll come back to that one in a moment. So what creates an effective HR management climate? And over time, I think there have been a lot more thinking and discussion about organizational culture and human resource management climate. And it's not just up to HR to create that. It's what ownership, what top management wants it to be. And I've seen cultures or climates that are what they are either by design or default. And sadly, too often by default, where it's not a conscious effort to create a productive climate from an HR standpoint, but rather by default it becomes something else, and usually that's not good. Whereas if it's done by design, it can be a very powerful force in bringing everyone together. Another overhead transparency that we've utilized. Please again bear with me on these. Just a suggestion of 6 areas of human resource management that are related to effective company performance, because that's what it's all about. HR is not operating in a vacuum. It's not in a silo. It's not a separate function. It's an integral part of the business. So certainly from a recruiting and selection standpoint, that we're very much involved in that, in identifying the right candidates and helping make the right selection decisions, getting the right team on the field. As I mentioned before, I like to use sports analogies. Performance management, a key part of that once we have the team on the field in terms of laying out the expectations for their performance, dealing with performance reviews, annual performance appraisals, developmental programs, training, and also even from a negative side, the progressive constructive disciplinary action. Management style is huge relative to retention. People enjoy working for the people that are in charge. And again, I mentioned training and development is a huge area in terms of HR having input, orchestrating our efforts to develop our workforce further. Again, back to staffing, that we get the right people in the right positions. We have some bench, we have some depth, some strength there. And then finally, back to that climate issue or culture, you could use that interchangeably in terms of the kind of culture that we want to instill, we want to develop, we want our employees to embrace. That led to another one of my own creation that I call the HR spectrum. And it's really a matter of, again, this full business partner here on the right-hand side, or the what I call the technocrat. It'd be more of that administrative expert as opposed to a real management type of mindset. But the titles, just looking at it kind of in descending order here, VP, senior VP, typically the upper echelon director sometimes is the senior person in HR. A smaller company might even be just HR manager. An HR administrator is typically the lower level management professional, HR management professional. And I put at the very end of that the turkey counter, just to again tie it into the technocrat. It's kind of a little tongue-in-cheek thing, but an actual situation that I encountered with that first company that I worked for after I left the Air Force, deciding not to make it a career. Lindbergh Heat Treating Company. I was there for 13 plus years. But in any event, in all seriousness, one of my most important, most critical duties was getting an accurate head count of our workforce, our employees, in order for us to order the right number of turkeys for a traditional giveaway program, very nice program at Thanksgiving every year. We had a 3-shift operation, and we would have the senior management team members, myself included, who would be out there at the end of each of the 3 shifts. And we'd have a trailer, semi-trailer, had backed up to the dock that was loaded with that exact number of frozen turkeys in a box, not a coupon to the local grocery store, but a frozen turkey. And we would pass them out wishing a happy Thanksgiving to everyone, specifically timed on a Tuesday before Thanksgiving, so the turkeys had time to thaw out to be cooked for a fine Thanksgiving dinner on Thursday following. But heaven forbid if I didn't have that head count right for ordering the right number of turkeys. I guess a couple extras would be okay that we could donate to a food bank, but anything short of that probably would have been sufficient grounds for termination. All serious. Anyway, we made a lot of progress over time to become more of a strategic business partner. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but it just kind of shows the various circles of influences, external and internal, on the HR management function as it pertains to supporting the goals and strategic objectives of the organization. They are many if we're doing it beyond just a transactional standpoint. Wish my arrow to advance it was working, but it's not. There have been some challenges along the way of various kinds. Sorry about the flipping back and forth here, but was only semi-rehearsed and not a slick presentation, but content hopefully you'll find useful. HRM practice. This is one of the prepared slides for one of the courses I taught. Actually, was at the MBA level with a graduate school. Is all too frequently a hodgepodge of policies based on little more than outmoded habits, current fads, patched up responses to former crises, and pet ideas of specialists. And sadly, that was the case. That may still be the case in certain places. And if that is the case anywhere in this day and age, then it needs to be addressed. It needs to be fixed. So much more at stake. This was a little poking fun. I like to throw cartoons in now and then. The slave driver here in the belly of the boat answering the phone as human resources with the slaves, the employees. They're in the belly there with their oars in the water. And hopefully this is not the image that HR has with your organizations, but I'm going to touch on some of those misconceptions here in just a moment. Trying to make sure that my words with my bullet points here are in sync with these slides. Apologize for not being a more slick presentation. There's also been a movement over time that maybe we should just blow it up, do away with HR. Probably came from the accounting people, I suspect. But some serious thought given to whether or not HR was in any way useful. So there have been some detractors along the way that would suggest that perhaps we could do without that function. I can remember that first company that I went to work for, Lindbergh, after the Air Force. I was told that not too long before I got there, during some tough times, there was actually a move by the division manager to shut down the HR department, the physical department, to save on the cleaning bill. Pretty sad testimonial in terms of how he felt about what little value was added by the HR department. I was also prompted to change my plan to talk about mentoring in this second episode and change gears significantly based on what I saw on YouTube as I was researching to see what are some of the topics people are talking about. Again, we'll come back to my contact information for you. Sorry that the slides are just a little bit jumbled. And I made some notes on just a few of those, and I want to comment on them from a standpoint of these are headlines on various YouTube presentations that were being offered. So here's just a sampling. What I wish I had known earlier in my HR career, suggesting some disillusionment with what the realities are in working in HR management. Putting the human back in human resources. Sad testimonial there, if in fact that's the perception of what human resources is, that we've dehumanized it. What does HR do all day? Legitimate question. But again, complex issue to describe. And if that's a general feeling on the part of employees or even managers and supervisors, then we have a lot of work to do to establish ourselves in the organization. HR sucks at helping humans. If that's the perception, then we're in deep, serious trouble from a standpoint of credibility. HR management explained in 10 minutes. You could probably do a capsule version, but that would be a disservice to what all is involved in human resource management. 4 reasons why HR is not your friend. That one really got me because nowhere has it ever really been the case that as an HR professional, you're looking to make friends You're a resource, you're a professional, you're an individual who has influence to get things done on behalf of the employees. But your goal is not to become friends with even management people because you have to make some tough calls or have input on difficult decisions. Serious question, is an HR degree worth it? I think many people maybe in this day and age are questioning that, especially those who are still working their way through school toward a bachelor's degree or considering a master's. I truly believe that the degrees are very beneficial. Those credentials mean a lot in terms of content on a resume and opening doors for you. So I think it really is worth it. If the HR team was honest, they're again a real shot in terms of a lack of credibility with the HR team. Don't trust HR, things employees and employers need to know. So again, back to the trust factor. If that's the issue we're fighting, we've got a huge problem relative to our role and our impact in the organization. I work in HR, but I swear I'm cool. Again, kind of comes back to becoming friends. Never was it an objective of mine to be cool. Hopefully, I'm establishing credibility, a track record day by day, and a good reputation in terms of being reliable. But being cool was never my objective. Two more. This is why people don't trust us. Again, back to a little self-reflection in HR, that we're conscious of the trust issue, but we are not effectively dealing with it in the eyes of the employees. And HR will not protect you. There again, a critical misunderstanding of what HR's role is, that we're certainly advocates for the employees. Now, I'll talk about that in just a moment. But we're not running interference. We're not protecting them. We want to ensure there is due process, that they have a voice. They have their day in court if there are issues. But being seen as a protector is really not the right way to look at it. In my mind, human resource management, that professional must, out of necessity, effectively play a dual role. First and foremost, you're a member of the management team, singing the school song, waving the flag, very much part of management. But secondly, right behind it, and no daylight in between, the good HR management professional is also an advocate for the employees, especially in a non-union environment. So from that standpoint, there's no daylight in between. It's a very fine line you have to walk. And I must say, not everyone in HR management can do this effectively. Hence, often then the misconceptions or valid perceptions of the role that HR plays or doesn't play. So the key is, again, not only being allowed to play that kind of role, that full business strategic partner, but being expected to do it. You must accumulate and judiciously wield power. Power is not a four-letter word. You must have or build significant influence or clout. Again, that you're able to get things done. You're perceived as someone who is influential and has impact. And again, helping employees have their voice. So you should be known and believed to be, again, trustworthy. So many of those other podcasts were talking about that trust issue, that you want to be perceived as trustworthy by employees, supervisors, managers, top management, and ownership. Not a small task. You must utilize, again, what is called that MBWA, manage by walking around, in the Peters book, In Search of Excellence. This means being proactive and visible for the employees on their home court, as I call it. There's no need for them to go to HR. They can, but they don't need to. That HR is available out in the workplace. An open door policy is good, but not sufficient in my mind. It's never enough. That managing by walking around was again popularized by Peters in that book. And I utilize that myself going all the way back to my active duty days in the Air Force, which was 1969 to 1973. And before it was a thing. So perhaps I should have written a book back then. Anyway, I've used this everywhere that I have been since, kind of instinctually, I guess, that all HR management professionals have to have strong management skills, good HR instincts, as I call it, and not to mention solid business acumen. You've got to be well versed outside of HR itself. So as I say, it served me well everywhere that I've been, with just one minor exception that's noted in chapter 14 of my book that's entitled The Shell Game. So additionally, Peters and Waterman said this in their book, quote, "The desk is a dangerous place from which to watch the world." And certainly I think that applies to watching the company function, the operation, whatever type of business it may be. Now, I've been making some renewed progress, by the way, on my book. I'm in the final editing phase, and I'm still hoping to find a way to get it published later this year. I threw up a little mock-up before about the cover of the book called Mission Incomplete. Probably talk about that in a future podcast, just in case someone might be interested. I did also reference this HR management audit very briefly. Let me just follow through in a couple of notes here, and then I'll pick up on that. The 9 companies that I mentioned that I worked for, I found that ideal situation for me in terms of would, could, and should, in terms of the role I played only twice in my career. The first was during that last 4 years of my 13 plus with Lindbergh, that first civilian employer that I went to work for after I left active duty. That was chapter 10, Lindbergh, the final years, the ultimate career goal, in my book. The second of those goes way back in the time frame of 1990 to 1995. And it was my model for how the human resource management function should be organized and the role that it should play in any organization. That was when I was elevated to the VP of HR for the first time. President of the company, to whom I reported, had keen insights into the importance and the value of HR management. I preceded him there by 6 months, so we were total strangers when he came on board. But he had a chance to assess the team that he inherited and could either clean house or keep people or make whatever changes he felt necessary. But he had told me that anytime he moved into a new organization, that he would always look first and foremost for the 2 people who led key functions, one being accounting, the other being HR. He needed strong players staffing both of those functional areas from his perspective, which was a little bit ironic because from an accounting standpoint, he was a real numbers guy. I think he was a math major in college. And I'd have to say from an HR standpoint, his HR instincts were as good as any I had ever seen. He was very good with people and a treat to work for. But he again was the one who, at the appropriate point in time, elevated me to the VP of HR position, allowing me to attain that part of that long-term goal that I referenced earlier. So this is chapter 12 in my book, bringing it all together. What a wonderful ride it was. Those very special 4 years that we had a good thing going. And I achieved that ultimate career goal in 1993 at the age of 45. I did fill a VP HR role one time later in my career, around about 20, 2003. Yeah, 2003. chapter 14 in the book, again, back to the shell game, but that was not an ideal situation, even though I got the title and functioned at that level. So other companies along the road of my journey were varying in forms or stages of dysfunction, or just not enlightened enough to utilize HR management in this manner. So there's no way to be more thoroughly having a positive impact on situations where HR is just not allowed or expected to play that kind of role. You just have to play the hand that you're dealt. And I've been in that situation as well. So I could go on for hours on that topic, but again, I don't want to get too far off the path here and want to wrap up this episode for you. So also just a few pet peeves real quick to throw in here while we're talking about HR management. HRBP, or Human Resource Business Partner, is not a good job title. You'll see it advertised often. To me, it's really just a functional role, but other people do think otherwise. Likewise, the HR generalist is not a job title, but rather a functional role. Generally, HR roles are either generalist or specialist, regardless of the title or level in the organization. So human resource management, just one final little pet peeve, should never report to the CFO or the head of accounting. That raises a huge red flag with me and with others. Let me explain just one example. One of the last corporate jobs I had, I was the senior level HR person called director, but I reported to the CFO. Well, that worked fine from a standpoint of he and I and our relationship, in that he was supportive, he was communicative, he was helpful in running interference for me at times in a tough environment. But I was at a disadvantage by not being perceived as functioning at that same senior level. As an example, the executives would have a staff meeting first thing every morning once the owner arrived, and I would not attend, in that I was not part of that senior level staff. Now, I would get information, albeit secondhand, from the CFO, so he did keep me informed, but again, it did not reflect well in terms of where HR fit into the organization. So just one example. I mentioned here, again, the HR management audit, one of my tools that I utilize and offer as a professional service to my clients. Too small to read here, but I did want to make mention of my mentoring program, one of the services that I also offer, as well as executive coaching with the business. So that, shamelessly putting in a plug here to drum up some more business, that I really am looking to add a select few organizational and individual clients to my business. My contact information once again. And keeping in mind that Eagle Association has been helping organizations and people soar to higher levels of success since 1995. And there's my soaring eagle I used last time, just to tell you that in naming my company how I got there, but that's an actual photo of an eagle that was perched in a big maple tree right along the shore at my property here, my house, that I caught him taking off from that tree. Just worked out perfectly as a symbol, emblem of my organization. So again, if you know of anybody who might need some mentoring, executive coaching, or companies that could benefit from human resource management consulting, I'm always looking to take on a few clients. And again, just remember, as I said before, you can't soar with eagles when you're running with turkeys. So goodbye from the old gray-haired HR guy. And by the way, my background that I chose today, as compared to what I did last time, I explained the fake background in Palm Springs, California. This is actually my home office here in the world headquarters of Eagle Associates, cluttered though it may be in the eyes of some. This is where I operate and do my teaching from here via Zoom currently. Have been for the past 5 years. So this is headquarters, corporate headquarters for Eagle Associates. Bye from the old gray-haired HR guy.